You're listening to the Launchcast, your favorite podcast on the planet, brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios with me, your host, George Andriopoulos. We're talking leadership, business, life, and growth right now as the countdown starts.
It's like food for your ears.
At this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast. Season 4, episode 405 today. It's called Inclusion at Work Has a Lot of Potentia. You're going to find out why in a minute. I am so happy to be continuing season 4 with you guys. We've been doing some deep dive leadership interviews, and today is going to be no different. But first, it's the LaunchDad himself, George Andriopoulos, bringing you your favorite podcast on the planet, leadership, business, life, growth, right now, as the beat drops. What is happening, my friends? George Andriopoulos back for another week with you on the Launchcast, and it has been a big week. Today is the day after Election Day, so hopefully you people have gone out there, gotten your vote on, stood up for your communities, been leaders, and voiced your opinions, no matter what way you voice them. As long as you voice them, it is super important. A lot of stuff going out there today. We're going on out there today. We've, the day after an election is always, it's a weird time, right? Because a lot of the rhetoric that goes on for weeks and weeks and months, all sort of comes to a head, and then here we are, right? With whatever the outcome was by you, is the outcome, and we've talked about this as leaders on this show before. We talk a lot about leadership and how to stand up in your communities and what that means. And I hope for a lot of you that no matter what the outcomes were yesterday in your own communities, that you're either emboldened to stand up and keep standing up for your community, keep doing what's important to you and advocating for your people. And if things didn't go your way, figure out the right methods, the proper methods to stand up and get out there and make a change in your own way. We've talked about here in my community here on Long Island that there have been moments in these last couple of years that have been pretty crazy. Communities kind of going wild and huge divides here, and that happens right here in my own community in Farmingdale, New York. And it's been tough for us here in our community. It's been really, really tough, and I look forward to the days that we can come back together as a community and work on our differences together. And it's not going to happen unless we are willing to stand up and lead in an empathetic way, in a way that we can listen to each other and create that change together. So that's the only thing I wanted to put out there and say today before we move on to our guests. So let me do that now, because that's why you guys are here. So today, my guest, Jeff Miller. Let me bring up his bio here. Jeff Miller is the CEO and founder of Potentia Workforce, a consulting firm that delivers technology, analytics, and human capital services by leveraging the talents of and providing opportunities to skilled, yet often overlooked neurodiverse individuals. Jeff is an executive with more than 25 years experience leading high-performance organizations that provide innovative solutions to the communities that they serve. He has launched and led businesses in the 20 largest markets in North America and across 4 continents. After his son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, Jeff began a deep exploration into neurodiversity, which ultimately led to the formation of Potentia, combining multiple passions to bring innovation to business internationally and opportunity to the remarkable and often underemployed neurodiverse community. A graduate of Williams College, Jeff lives in the Houston area with his wife, Samantha, and awesomely cool teenage son, Charlie. So let us bring Jeff on the screen and unmute him. Hello, my friend. How are you?
George, how are you?
Good, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super pumped to have you on here.
Oh, my pleasure. I really liked your intro as well. We were all watching the political returns last night, and I couldn't have said it better. Really appreciated your intro there.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. So let's dive in today. I'm excited to have you. We were introduced by my good friend Dave Thompson. Dave and I have worked together in many capacities before. Incredible dude, and of course, anybody that Dave tells me is another incredible person that's on a mission to do good things. I'm with it, man. So I'm so happy to have you on here today, and I'm glad that we're getting to know each other and making some change out there together, even if it's just with this conversation today.
Likewise.
Yeah. So let's start where we always start with these interviews, Jeff. Are you a leader?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. What is your definition of leadership?
I think it isn't about title. To me, I'm a big fan of the. It's almost become cliche, right? But the whole idea of servant leadership. Leaders have an opportunity to serve people that they care about and people that they want to see succeed. And I've tried to be that throughout my career. But I think for me, as you alluded to, the last 3 or 4 years, I really was blessed to find my life's work, if I could call it that. And that's all about serving. So to me, serving others is really the purest definition of leadership, regardless of what your title is.
Yeah, so I love that definition, Jeff. We're going to dive deeper into what you do now, especially with Potentia. But talk to me about, and we're going to do a chronological dive here in a minute. But talk to me about leadership back then, before what it has become for you now. Obviously, with your son Charlie, being neurodiverse and finding this community that you now advocate for and you do so much work for. What did servant leadership look like for you before all that at the beginning of your career?
I would say it was a noble effort. It was sometimes effective. So and some people might be surprised by that. So I started my career out of college and just networked my way into a role in IT recruiting right out of school, outside of Boston, where I'm from. And didn't know anything about either IT or recruiting, but had some people who took pity on me and taught me the business. And I was able to have some success there. I was with a company that was fast growing, and so I was able to be sort of caught up in that a little bit. They sent me out to the West Coast at 24. I still remember being in the CEO's office, and he's got the push pin map of the U.S. and he's saying, I don't know why I'm there. I'm thinking I might be in trouble for something. And he says, look, we're a little light over on the left side there, don't you think? And I said, yeah, I sure. I didn't know, right? And he said, what do you think about going out there and starting up some offices for us? And I was 24, and you could have knocked me over with a feather. I had no idea. So I got thrust into a management role, I will say, pretty early on. But the leadership took time. And probably the biggest thing that I realized about the difference between management and leadership for me was I needed to I thought when I started, I thought that leadership was about being perfect. And I realized it's actually the opposite of that, right? Your folks can't relate to you if you're not real. Yeah. And so it took me years to really figure out that it was okay to show your cracks and show your struggles and show your areas where you that's not something that you're great at, let's say. And so for me, it was really all about that idea of a little bit of vulnerability, but just being real with the people that you work with and let them know, look, I don't have all the answers. Let's figure it out together. And I think as I started to figure that out, I grew up in a very sort of buttoned down New England, kind of background, raised primarily by my dad. My dad he was the youngest in his family. I was the youngest of three. My brothers are almost a half generation older than I am. So my dad was a little bit older than the other dads. And he was I mean, you could set your watch by him. He was a guy who always showed up. I could count on him. But if I wanted to have a conversation about anywhere where I was struggling, he was not as comfortable in that. I think a lot of people from that generation relate, right? So without it being said, I was sort of taught as a youngster that, you don't show any of that stuff. You don't show any of the areas where you're struggling or where you're not as great as you want to be or as good as you want to be. And so it took me a while and my dad was a fantastic role model for me in a lot of ways. A lot of turbulence and challenges in the family growing up, and he was the one you could set your watch by in terms of just showing up, and I really learned that from him. I learned about showing that vulnerability later on as I kind of went through life and learned sometimes by doing the wrong things. And why am I not connecting with my people? Why am I not? Well, because you're trying to be perfect, Jeff, and nobody's perfect,
right?
And I had mentors that kind of took me under their wing and showed me that. You got to be real with people, especially today. People expect that of their leaders. They expect you to, right, to not only meet them where they are, but to be honest about where you are.
Yeah, and I love that answer for so many reasons. The reason I asked you the question about before versus now in terms of the genesis of your leadership is because it's kind of one of the goals of the show, right? So our demographic is interesting. So we have a ton of business owners that listen to this show. We've placed in the top 60 on Apple Podcast entrepreneurship charts multiple times, top 50, I think we broke once. But we also have a large contingency that are aspiring entrepreneurs, aspiring leaders, right? And so the goal of the show is to kind of show these unconventional journeys to leadership. And, I'm of the same ilk where multiple times in my life, there have been moments where I was inspired or put in a situation where something now mattered that never mattered before, that was never even on my radar. And so, and my journey was a little bit different. I fumbled a lot more through leadership when I was younger because I just didn't get it. And then, becoming a father changed me. And a moment that I had, which I've talked about for many years, where I got into the nonprofit world for the first time and co-founded a nonprofit for a girl who now would have been my sister-in-law, was diagnosed with cancer and sort of changed my whole trajectory and led me on a path to being the servant leader that I always should have been. And so for our audience that doesn't get that yet, that hasn't hit that moment yet, these interviews are really about understanding that it's okay that you haven't hit that moment yet, because that thing may have not hit you yet. You may have not experienced that thing yet that is going to inspire you to get to that next moment. So I appreciate that answer, Jeff, very much. Talk to me a little bit more about what life was like growing up for you. I know you grew up in New England, primarily raised by your dad. What was the trajectory for you in terms of the plan, coming out of high school and going to college?
So the growing up, I would say a couple of things. The thing that strikes me as I think back on it is, again, my dad was that drumbeat, and he was that steady force for me that really was. Words can't express how important that was to me to have that as a youngster. Without getting into too much detail on it, we had a lot of instability in the house. My mom had some mental health issues that made her, not the consistent mother that she wanted to be. She actually needed to check herself into a facility at different times. So I'd go to the babysitters, and I'd actually get a call, from my dad, and I to go to the school office, and he'd let me know, hey, mom's not feeling great. That was sort of our euphemism, in Boston for what was going on, which was a lot more serious than that. So you're going to go to the babysitters today. And I might have been at the babysitters for 3 months until my mom came back.
Wow.
So there was a lot of instability there. And the thing that was my refuge was sports. For me, it was just that idea of competing, that idea of just, throwing yourself into something that took you out of your day-to-day challenges and struggles and concerns. And so, I didn't necessarily play them well, but I played 5 varsity sports in high school, just to give you an idea. I was signing up for everything they let me sign up for.
Yeah.
And so, that was a lot of it for me. Going to college, I needed to pick a sport. I'm 6'7", so basketball seemed to be probably a smart one. And I loved the sport. So I ended up playing 4 years of college basketball at Williams up in Massachusetts, and had a wonderful time there. And so for a lot of it for me was that was my passion. That was what I did. When I looked at, and Williams had a great academic background, but I was like, who's the basketball coach? Well, I was really focused on the sports side, and luckily they took pity on me again. There's another, pity party. I'm 6'7", and I could occasionally hit a jump shot. So otherwise I would not have gotten into Williams. I had good grades, but I didn't have the kind of elite grades that get you in there. So it was really a blessing to be able to go to a place like that. Little smaller school, played for 4 years. I was selected captain my senior year, which meant a lot to me. So coming out of school, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I'd very much sort of been in that sort of station to station mode. Okay, here's where I am now. I wasn't thinking 3 steps ahead, which I think good leaders do. I wasn't at that point yet. I need to get a job. I need to start to pay off, some of my debts and start a career of doing something.
Sure.
And it was just through my network of friends and colleagues, and actually, that I learned a little bit about the staffing industry. I ended up cold calling my way into an interview my senior year. It's a funny story. My dad, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so I never had a car or anything like that. And I worked every spring break, every off break I had. And Williams is a pretty affluent school, so there were people going, what are you doing for spring break? Oh, I'm going to Switzerland to do some skiing. Oh, okay, right. I'm going to be roofing in Worcester. Right? Got it. Have fun. I'll see you when you get back. And so, that was our thing. My college cohort was of a similar, all kind of middle class backgrounds. I might have been, maybe a little bit, lower than some, but we were all kind of in that same bucket. And we got the idea that we wanted to go to spring break, and nobody had a car. So I called my dad and said, hey, I don't want to work this my senior year spring break. I don't want to go I don't want to work this time. I want to actually have fun with my friends, but nobody has a car. Can I borrow one of yours and take it to Florida with my buddies? And shockingly, he said yes.
Wow.
But he said, and this gives you a little insight into my dad. He said, I'll let you borrow the car on one condition, that you set up 3 interviews before you leave. 3 job interviews for when you graduate.
Okay.
Right. And this is senior year spring. Right. And so sure, next morning I'm at career counseling, and I'm suddenly very motivated to find a job. And that was one of those interviews, ended up being the company that I was with for 11 years. It's funny how things work out, and how formative a role your parents play with you. My mom, with the struggles that she had, trying to support her, my dad really leaning on him as that rock for me.
Sure.
And then finding sports, and I think starting to find my way into some more leadership roles through sports. That was a big part of it.
Yeah. I want to ask you real quick about that whole captaining your senior year thing, because I always find the relationship between sports and leadership so interesting in terms of the jump start that you get on how you can apply that later. I remember playing sports myself in school and not necessarily understanding that those skills can transcend, right? On the field, yes, absolutely. If you're going to be a leader, you're going to lead your teammates, talk to them, whatever you're doing, or in the locker room, of course. But it was funny it's funny when you're younger, sometimes you walk out of that locker room and you kind of forget that, like, oh, all the stuff that I just did, if I applied that in real life, that's going to give me a head start. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was tremendous. I learned a ton from it. You know, I had great coaches and good coaches, and a few that I think, you know, maybe weren't the best, right?
Sure.
Like we all had that experience. So I learned from watching those folks, and you also learn how to just persevere through adversity, right? A lot of the entrepreneurial journey is about belief and persistence. And I don't know what teaches you better than sports about look, we got to believe in the mission. We got to work our tails off to make that happen. But there are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be potholes. There are going to be things that happen. And, you know, how did we lose to that team? And what do you do to recover from that? So I felt like sports was an incredible training ground for me for later in life, for sure.
In college, what was, just curious before we move on with your career, what was your actual major in college?
Psychology.
Psychology major.
Psychology. Yeah. I started out as an econ major, actually. And it was too tough. I was not meant to be an econ major. So I switched. I hadn't committed yet, but I was going down the road to be an econ major. And then my sophomore year, I switched to psychology because I really liked the professors. And also, if I'm honest, it was a little bit easier and gave me a little more time to work on the jump shot. But it ended up being psychology, and which has served me well, I think over the years.
I was going to say, I know that that plays a large role. I own a consulting company, and we do all types of we've moved on from the term management consulting to consulting plus. That's a term we work on now, and I deal with whether it's operations, strategy, marketing, whatever the case is. But you're dealing with primarily on these consults, we're dealing with C-suite executives, and then in order to get to the crux of whatever the issue is or build strategy for a company, you're dealing with employees of every level of the company. And what I have found as a leader is that when you sort of include psychology in the thought process in terms of communicating with people and figuring out where underlying issues are, it has sped up our ability to fix these issues so much. And that's just being an empathetic leader, understanding that there's stuff in the basement sometimes when you look at a specific situation that is more than just what's on the surface. So I'm sure that's been super helpful for you as a leader.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll get into it when we talk about Potentia, but a lot of what we do is really around creating that psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
Sometimes as leaders, we get focused on our challenges, and we don't necessarily realize that it's tough for that new employee or that existing employee to come to us and raise their hand and make a suggestion. Or say, hey, I think, what about this? Or say, I'm struggling a little bit, and I think I'd be more effective if we could do X and Y.
Yeah.
And so, creating that environment for we work a lot with the neurodiverse community, as you said in the intro. One of the things we find is that creating that psychological safety. Google did a study on this recently where they talked about it's far and away the number one predictor of team success. Is that ability to create psychological safety in your team where it's okay to disagree without being disagreeable. It's okay to challenge the boss. Do your homework and make sure you have a well thought out argument, but challenge. That's how we get better. And so that whole idea of psychological safety is just absolutely massive. And it's something that I did some of through my career. And the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys of the career before I got to Potentia. I didn't necessarily know that was the term, that was what I was doing, but I knew that for me growing up in that kind of stoic environment where you never admit anything that's a challenge, as I got into my career, I realized that wasn't serving me that well. And that in addition, if the people who worked for me or with me adopted that same posture, I'd really be kind of flying blind out there. I really wouldn't know what was going on because I hadn't created the environment where people could come to me and challenge me, or come to me with you know, we've got a big project going on, and it's not the right time to bring this up, but you know, my elderly parent just moved into our house, and they're really sick, and so that's going to affect, you know, probably how I show up, but I also need to ask for a little bit of flexibility because I need to take care of that person, right? But we got this big project we're looking to get done, right? What we find is that the bigger the organization, the more they create this kind of institutional inertia, where it's like, well, we've thought about it, and this is our policy, or this is where we're going, or this is the big initiative of the day. And so the individual kind of gets lost in that. And they can get lost in the purpose of that and get excited about it. That's great. But if they get lost in it where they don't feel like they can come forward and talk about areas where they want, you know, are experiencing a challenge and want to be better, then, you know, you as a leader are running around blindfolded. And I started to figure that out over time. And then with Potentia, it just turbocharged that learning for me.
And it's funny that it does take that, you mentioned the peaks and valleys of the career, the ups and downs. It does take that time, that experience, that maturity that grows over time in order to, I don't want to use the word master it, but you know what I mean? Like, it just, in order to effectively use that type of process in your organization, to be that type of leader effectively, you have to learn, you have to make those mistakes. You know, I always tell people that, look, I do what I do now, and if people consider me a thought leader or a business expert, a turnaround specialist in businesses, great. But that came because I was the worst. I was the worst at the beginning. I may have been really good at what I did on a day-to-day basis, but managing and leading, oh my gosh, at the beginning of my career, I was horrible at it. And it's because of those mistakes and the mistakes of those around me that I learned how to be better, that I learned how not to be that person. And I could pinpoint when I did see somebody that was like me and making those mistakes and help them on the road to fixing that. We do this one thing, and it was interesting that you mentioned this situation with somebody, you know, an elderly parent that's sick and now moved in with them, and it's affecting things. We do something at my company called the Day One Initiative, and and I'm not afraid to say, it's like the secret sauce of what we do. It is the secret sauce of what we do. It is a conversation between, especially when we're dealing with employee-related issues, right? And it is a conversation between that employee and that manager, that C-suite person, whoever that is, right? And the Day One Initiative is basically, you hired her or him on day one, and you wanted them here, and you saw something in them that was so important to the benefit of this company that you made it happen to bring them here. And you, on day one, wanted to work for him because you saw something in this company, this opportunity, this job. So you were connected on day one, and everything worked on day one, and then it diverged. Why did it diverge? And usually it's, well, the expectations have changed, and this isn't my job description, or, you know, this person's coming in late every day. But sometimes it's, sorry, my mom got sick right after I started working here, and she moved in, and it has really affected my life in so many ways. And then it becomes, well, how can I support you in that so that you can be an effective employee here, and not just an employee, but to turn this into a career. And these conversations often lead to these solutions that were so simple and just communications, and everything's fixed, you know, and it winds up becoming, for us, somebody might go like, that was genius. How did you, I didn't do anything. we never, that's the secret of Launchpad 516. We don't do anything. We just get people talking and they figure it out, you know? So anyway,
my first CEO said, every problem we have has, or maybe virtually every problem we have has a communication solution.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So you mentioned, and you and I are kindred spirits on this. You mentioned that your leadership at the beginning was maybe not the best. Was there an event, or was there something that showed you that you needed to pivot? And if so, what was that?
Yeah, and I've talked about this on the show before, but I'm very honest about this. I got to a point in my career, and it was about 11 years ago that everything sort of hit the fan. I got to a point in my career where I grew an ego that was just monstrous. I started figuring things out in terms of the successes, like the mistakes that were happening early. I had mentors that really pushed me hard, challenged me hard, sometimes in a not so healthy way, but I appreciate it because they pushed me and they helped me become so good at what I did. But I guess being in this ultra competitive environment and where the value was wealth and success and status and all these things. Once I kind of figured that stuff out and really started elevating, I grew to a point. I hit a mountaintop in my industry that I worked in originally, and the ego came along with all the money and success and everything like that. And honestly, just the shit hit the fan, and it left me realizing that I was not a good human being. In that very moment, I was the father of two little kids. It cost me a marriage. It left me in almost career ruin at the time, and I just had to pick up the pieces and say, who are you? You know what I mean? I looked at that guy and I said, I don't recognize you. And so at the same time is when the thing happened that I mentioned before with meeting a young girl who was diagnosed with cancer, and wound up banding together with some amazing people, and we started a nonprofit organization. And I don't know, these things just sort of led me to a place where I said, okay, I think having this experience happening now during this really difficult time in my life is probably a good thing. So let me focus on figuring out who George is for real, not the status and the wealth and any of that stuff. Let me focus on figuring out who he is. Let me focus on my two little kids. I'm divorced now. I don't want to be a divorced dad. I just want to be a dad. And figuring that out organically without the outside influence was really important to me. And then, my entrepreneurial brain kicked in and I started my company. And when I finally got back to the place where I had the resources, and I had become the leader that I had always dreamed of being, I wanted to do good with my company. So we had more of a benevolent mission than a mission that was based on just, accumulating wealth. We wanted to help. Our mission was always to provide individuals and organizations with the tools and resources to thrive and succeed. And everything we do, every add-on service, anything we do is based around that mission and has been for 10 years now. So that moment for me, that rock bottom moment, was what taught me, nope, I can't continue like this. And I said this line one time, and then I want to move back to you because I don't even know why I'm talking about myself here. I appreciate the question, though. I said this line at a very emotional and pivotal award that I received a few years back. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame of my high school for my accomplishments, in business and nonprofit and everything. I was really speaking to the students when I gave the acceptance speech, and I said, for the first 30 or so years of my life, I was something like a less than productive citizen of this planet. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for that time and actually feel like I deserve this honor that I'm getting right now. And that's kind of been the theme, since then,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
I appreciate the question, though. I want to, before we move on, go ahead.
How, and then I'll shut up and let you ask the question. It's interesting how many people I talk to that are successful in the sort of outward sense, and yet they find their passion. But they find it through disillusionment and suffering.
Yeah.
Right. It's those low moments, and I similar experience. Where you learn through struggle, and when everything's going great and everybody's patting you on the back, and that's an ego play, right? But when you go through those struggles, to me that's where the juice is, right? That's where the real opportunity is to figure out, okay, I'm here. What do I do now? Yeah. And so for me, it was actually So I sort of moved on I've been in the staffing world for a while. I left it. I went into more of a consulting role, which I liked. We were running big implementations for people, and the staffing space is interesting because, um, when we close a sale, someone gets a job, and so you would think it would be kind of this high energy thing. It's actually really kind of cutthroat and competitive, and customers kind of commoditize you, and the managers are too busy to talk to you and submit resumes through this portal, and the junior recruiter will reach out to you if we're interested. Thank you very much, and you're really kind of. And so I had a lot of success with that, but it was leaving me feeling like unfulfilled in some way, right? And so then I went into consulting where we had more direct engagement with the customers, and I liked that a lot more. And I felt like I was providing more value, and we were able to connect with leaders and say, what are you really trying to achieve here? I didn't think I'd go back into staffing, but I did because I got recruited to run the global staffing company that we mentioned earlier. So it was a goal that I'd had for a while to have that corner office, and I thought, well, I'll be happy and fulfilled when I get there. Yeah. And it was not the case.
Yep.
Right. And so the things that I had experienced and sort of the politics and different people's agendas and, customer stuff. And, I thought, well, surely when I get to this place, that'll go away. Well, I was still reporting to a board of directors. There was at least as much politics there as there was on my local sales floor. And so I thought, this is interesting. I've gotten here, and it's sort of like, is this all there is? There are a lot of great things about it, but there was a gnawing feeling like I was sort of destined to do more. Right around that time, so we moved to Houston. I'm in that role for a bit. My mom had actually gotten her mental health issues sorted out in a pretty good way, and she was doing pretty well mentally. Unfortunately, then physically, things started to come about. She actually was diagnosed with Parkinson's and lived with Parkinson's for about 10 years. And the end when you have Parkinson's is really rough. And so it was very bittersweet. It was, when she passed, she was at peace and she wasn't suffering anymore. But we missed her, and it was, you only have one mom. And so I was actually up at the funeral with Charlie, with my son. And Charlie was a early teen and autistic, as you'd mentioned. And so, we'd figure out a mode with him that had been going pretty well, kind of year to year with school. And, how can we help Charlie be his best as a 6th grader or a 7th grader, right? And that was going fairly well, I would say. We were very intentional about it. But now I'm watching him as an early teen, and I'm aware of his strengths, but also his challenges. And with autism, a lot of it is communication. Some people think that empathy is an issue. I don't find that to be the case at all. I just find that the way autistic people will express their empathy may be a little different. And just reading cues and things like that. Sometimes there can be some challenges, some sensory challenges, some other things. None of which stop them from being wonderful at employment, at the jobs they do, which we can get to. But anyway, so this is my son, and I'm watching him across the room at the funeral, comforting my dad, and just being very attuned and very emotionally intelligent. And it was at that moment that I realized I've got a young man on my hands. I mean, and parents can hopefully relate to this, right? It happens quick. Number one, I'm 6'7". He's almost looking me in the eye. So that was my first clue. The second clue is I'm watching my autistic son comforting my dad, and I'm thinking, wow. And I know that was the moment that started me on the journey to Potentia, because, and if I'm honest, I think part of it was I was ready for something bigger and to be of service in a more profound way. I just didn't know what it was, even though it was staring me right in the face. Because I'd gotten to this role, and I still had a little bit of like, okay, thought this would be more, more profound or more something, right? And it's kind of the same thing, just with a loftier title. And at that point, I realized, okay, we've done pretty good in this year-to-year thing with Charlie, but what about when he's 25 or 35, right? what's his life going to be like as an adult? And I had to admit I didn't really have as clear a picture as I needed to. So I didn't know at the time, but that started me on a research project purely as a dad, just to figure out the things that I was supporting him with and helping him with. And he's the one doing all the work, but I'm just trying to be supportive where I can. I needed to deep dive. I needed to learn a lot more about what adult autism looked like and how I could help him to be his best self as a 25, 26-year-old or 36-year-old or beyond. So I started doing a whole bunch of research on this. And I learned a couple of things that really blew me away. Number one, I learned, so autism fits into this broader neurodiversity conversation, right? So there's autism, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia. These are the most common differences that fit into that neurodiversity category. And there are others. But neurodiversity, as we just defined it, represents at least 25% of the adult population.
Yep.
So at least 1 in 4 folks is walking around, as we say, as we've been taught, basically with a different operating system. It's not better, it's not worse, but they're going to communicate a little differently, see the world a little bit differently, may interact a little differently, may respond to stimuli a little bit differently. But they're also incredibly capable, like my son, and I know he's going to go on and do great things. So that was the first thing that I learned, and I talked to people around the world. I was fortunate; I had a lot of business contacts, and it just sort of evolved. The second stat that I learned that really bothered me was, okay, so within the neurodiversity community, if you're autistic, like Charlie, and you've got a lot of capabilities, you've got some challenges, and let's say you go to a 4-year school, right? Let's say you go to NYU. Up by you, right? And get a nice GPA, graduate, probably much better GPA than I had, which wouldn't be tough. And you graduate, right? And maybe you graduate with a high demand skill in engineering or STEM or what have you, right? Computer science, cybersecurity. You're still looking at an 80% unemployment rate if you're neurodiverse, with a 4-year degree, with skills that everybody needs. And it just points to the fact that our hiring process is broken for 25% of the population. And then the third piece that I looked at, so there's the 25%, there was the 80%. And then I said, well, is anybody doing anything about this? Like, this is really, troubling. I learned about some companies that were doing neurodiversity hiring programs. They were going out and intentionally hiring people who were neurodiverse. And the programs were fantastic. They were incredibly impactful. All the ROI stats on new skill acquisition and retention. The average neurodiversity hiring program has a 96% retention rate, just to give you an idea. That's average. So if you're working in a business where you've got 20%, you can drop that to 4. I mean, the program pays for itself many times over just on that stat. But these candidates are also more productive than their peers with similar experience. They pick up new skills faster. They're more innovative. So you've got basically what could be the ideal employee, but someone who doesn't interview well in the traditional sense. But I said, this is the business case I'm hearing from these few companies that are doing this is really off the chart. And I asked to my counterparts, the people who are leading these programs at Microsoft and JP Morgan Chase and, big companies. Yeah. I said, well, how many companies are doing this? Fortune 500. And what I could, it was maybe 1 to 2% of the Fortune 500 was doing anything about this in 2019 when we started. And so I thought, okay, I care deeply about this. There's a really strong business case here. I've found something that I'm really passionate about. And I liked what I did before, but not, the level of commitment to this is just orders of magnitude different because it's personal for me, right? And so that was really the thing that led me to say, okay, we've got to carry this really wonderful message, not just it's a head and heart message, right? I mean, we know we're doing the right thing, and people resonate with that. But from a ROI standpoint, this is off the charts, right? We've got to take this to other companies and spread the word because this is just too good to be at 1 to 2% of the Fortune 500. So that was really the research project that I started with Charlie that led me to then go to Samantha, my wife, and say, I think I need to leave the corner office and do a startup. And this is the one I want to do. And nobody's really doing it, but I just believe in it so much. So really, the stars of the show are Charlie and Samantha because Samantha was like, "Yeah, I can see how passionate you are about this. You need to do this. Go do it."
Yeah,
And of course, it was Charlie at the beginning that lit the spark.
that's amazing. And now a word from our sponsors. Well, that's a nice song. Hey, everybody. It's me, the LaunchDad himself, George Andriopoulos, the host of the Launchcast, the co-host of Over My Dad podcast. But more importantly, I'm here today on behalf of Launchpad 516 Studios, the podcast production company that makes those two shows, the one you're listening to now, and so many others possible. Now, what is Launchpad 516 Studios? Well, it's the brainchild of Launchpad 516. It's a podcast production company, and we help you from conceptualization to production to recording to post-production to monetization. The key word here, let's turn that hobby, that idea into a revenue stream. But more importantly, let's get that important idea out there and get your voice heard, because that's what matters right now. Hit us up, launchpad516studios.com to find out more information, or send us an email, podcast@lp516.com. DM me at LaunchPadCEO on all the platforms. Let's chat. Let's get your voice heard. We're pretty good at this, guys. Don't let this offer slip by you. Later, guys.
This is John
and Mark Cronin from
John's Crazy Socks.
And we're interrupting to say we hope you're enjoying this episode, but please make sure to check out our show, the Spreading Happiness Podcast, another great show produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. New episodes are available every week on all your favorite podcast platforms. Join us on our new podcast as we continue our mission, spreading happiness.
Thank you, folks.
I'm glad we went down this road. So first thing I want to say is moving into this role with you, I want people to understand what you had accomplished in business going into Potentia. So prior to founding Potentia, Jeff was president of a global workforce services firm, delivering record profits while closing 4 acquisitions in less than 18 months. Earlier in his career, he was division president for a healthcare consultancy, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on. So the importance of saying that is that this move, this spark moment, and that's a term we use on the show, the spark moment that led you down a very specific path in life, good, bad, or indifferent, was so important that you literally uprooted your entire career to say, nope, this is the line now. I'm going to move into more purpose-driven stuff, socially conscious work. And it was more just, it was a hard decision for you. But coming from the background that you come from, I know that you obviously built a business that works and that is solvent and that helps people and provides opportunities for, of course, the neurodiverse individuals that you are finding placement for, but of course your team as well. So I just want to read the mission from the Potentia website to our audience here. Potentia, our mission is to help organizations to be their best by leveraging neurodiverse talent through our STARS program, optimizing performance and culture through Empower, and leveraging innovative tech and analytics talent to deliver projects. We do this in order to provide career opportunities for neurodiverse individuals. At Potentia, we don't just train companies on how to be neurodiverse competent. We hire our own primarily neurodiverse teams to manage and deliver our services. We're for the neurodiverse by the neurodiverse. So, first of all, that last line is so important to me, especially today. We have learned that it's like you said at the beginning of the career, right? In terms of your leadership and doing something more than just you. You tried your best, right? We all try our best until we fully understand. But in today's world, and that not just the climate that we live in, but the fact that we are more knowledgeable now, more empathetic about the people that we serve, and there's just more information at our fingertips, we understand that representation in every facet of the word is so key. And so when you say neurodiverse by the neurodiverse, that is super important to me. So talk to me about that and what the importance was to make sure that your team included a good population of neurodiverse individuals as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to practice what we preach, right? So for us, if we're talking to employers, number one, we need to be, as you mentioned, we need to be successful and sustainable to do the things that we want to do. There are things that we do that are never going to make us a nickel, but they're just part of the mission, and that's great. But we've got to make sure that we're successful in the revenue generating activities, right? We are a social enterprise, but we're also a for-profit. When I was looking at it, I talked to a lot of people about this, and I talked to a lot of people who run nonprofits, and they encouraged me to do a for-profit in this case. And I think part of it was that, they knew that I didn't have any experience running a nonprofit. So that was probably a smart move. But also the message that we're delivering to our customers is that you should do this. Yeah, it's the right thing to do, but it's going to be good for your business. It's going to make your business more successful, more profitable, more competitive. You're going to have more engagement from your customers. You can engage with your partners and vendors on this. On more a core values level, which a number of companies are doing, so that there was a lot there. I just felt like, for me, it was a mission that just once it got a hold of me, it wouldn't let me go, and I just felt compelled to do it. I just felt like it was something that I just had to do. And it's an absolute privilege to get to do what we do every day, for sure.
I want to put out that, and I very much understand that the feeling of being, not just compensated, right? Like that, because that's what we did at the beginning of our careers, but fulfilled every day, so much better than being compensated. Trust me when I say that. I want to refer back to something you just said and a statistic that you gave earlier that 80% of the neurodiverse population is unemployed. One of our good friends of the show here, Mark and John Cronin own a social enterprise called John's Crazy Socks. Incredible company. They do a podcast with my production company, the Spreading Happiness podcast. They've done a TEDx talk on my stage. Mark, they actually did, after the TEDx talk they did with me, did another TEDx talk called Hiring Individuals with Disabilities is Good Business. And I think the original title was something like, it's not just, I forget the word he used, but it's not just the right thing to do, let's say, it's good business. Mark, being one of the co-founders of John's Crazy Socks, he and I have had we love talking shop. He and I have had a lot of business conversations, and when the Great Resignation was happening, during the pandemic and things were just really shifting and people were having a really tough time staffing businesses, he and I talked and he goes, I don't understand why people are having such a hard time. Like we are fully staffed. We have no shortage of employees that we need. And it's because they are, their terminology is they're employing people with differing abilities. And so, the level of employees that you're dealing with, we have to be honest with ourselves that there are different levels, different abilities here. And there are agencies out there, human services agencies that do help with training and education and vocational training for individuals on the spectrum at different levels. But why this is so important to me is, and I think you and I had this conversation, was when I see organizations like that, I think it's amazing. But my thought process is, and of course we're going to put ability aside here because I do understand that sometimes abilities do affect this. My thing is, why can't that person be a C-suite executive? Why can't that person own? Why does there have to be a ceiling here? And so I love seeing what Potentia does with staffing, with trying to change that number of the 80% unemployment rate. I think you and I had talked about this, but talk to us about what the average salary is of people that are coming out of this this program with you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, a couple of points I want to make, and I want to circle back to the representation point because there was more I wanted to say.
Oh yeah.
Such a good point. I think representation falls into it's the right thing to do, and it's also just the smart thing to do as well. So the STARS program for us, if I can give you a little bit of overview on that, right? So STARS is Spectrum Training, Recruitment, and Support. Most of our training is for the employers because the employers, number one, know that they're not succeeding in this area. They want to succeed in this area. And they're the ones that need to tweak what they're doing, right? They're the ones who need to be more inclusive in terms of what they're doing. We're not looking to cure someone who's autistic because in my experience, they don't want to be cured. It's part of their identity. It's like being left-handed or being gay or, whatever, right? It's part of who you are.
Yep.
Now it can come with a lot of challenges. And as you said, the spectrum is really huge. If you look at autism, you have people who are nonverbal, who need around the clock care, right? And then you have Richard Branson and Elon Musk, right? They're all on the spectrum. So there's incredible diversity within that. And I think for us with STARS, the first piece of it is training. All of our training is ND led, meaning all of our training is delivered by people who are neurodistinct themselves. And so, because a lot of the exercise that we're going through here is a change management exercise. We're dealing with companies that have well-worn practices, and we've always done it this way, Jeff. Why do I need to do it differently? And I could give them the answer to that question, or I could have someone who is neurodistinct themselves give that answer to the manager and say, listen, I'm sure that job description has worked fine for you in the past. I'm just telling you that for me as a neurodistinct individual, I would not apply to that job as it's written, and here's why. Right? And that really carries the day. That really brings it a whole different level when you're talking with someone. And by the way, our trainers are fantastic. And they'll say, by the way, ask me anything you want to ask me. You can't offend me. If there's anything you want to know, if you think it's a dumb question, right? Because we need to get them educated because the concept, neurodiversity has existed forever, right? It's part of the like biodiversity. It's just part of the different ways that people develop. But the term was only coined in 1998. It's a relatively recent term, and a lot of people are still, coming to grips with it. The medical model is a big part of that, where these things were diagnosed. And if you think about how the medical model works, you diagnose something and then you try and fix it. You try and cure it, right? And so if you're diagnosing someone with autism, okay. But that's part of their identity. Number one, you're not going to change it. But number two, they don't want you to change it. They just want their lives to be a little easier, and they want the world to be a little bit more accommodating to their differences. Is by and large the experience that I see. So that representation piece is really key. That the ND-led piece is really key. In terms of the type of work that we do and the average salaries, our average starting salary last year was $76K. This year it'll be about $81K.
Amazing.
And that's intentional because we looked at it. When I looked at the landscape, I saw a lot of people doing a lot of really good work in nonprofits and state agencies and other organizations. But principally it was about getting candidates from their parents' couch to a job, which is a really important piece, right? And so it might be flipping burgers or bagging groceries or what have you, but just get some experience, get some experience being, responsible, and you got to be there on time, and you got to listen to your boss, and you got to deal with some challenging people, and that's incredibly valuable. And for a lot of people, that's a great job for them, and they may have that job for years and years.
Sure.
Wonderful. For a lot of our candidates, that's a stepping stone job, right? That's an incredibly important job, but they've got a degree in engineering, and they've got student loans, and they want to be able to play. These are highly intelligent people who, again, because they may communicate a bit differently or have some sensory issues, struggle in the traditional interview sense. So they end up getting into these sort of low-hanging fruit jobs. And again, that's great, but for a lot of our guys, it's not great if they stop there, right? They're making $17 an hour, $19 an hour. We can get them into a program where they're making $76K or $81K, and it's life-changing. We had a guy who was unemployed, underemployed for about 2 years, got into our program. He's now in a leadership track with a Fortune 100 company, and he just bought his first house. Like that's why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to have stories like that and to have that happen. And so for us as a I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs, who may be listening to this. For us, it was important because the problem is so big that the biggest thing for us was to learn what to say either no or not yet to, right? We had to pick our lane. And so our lane has become, because we didn't see anybody else really doing it, those white collar roles, accountants, engineers, bookkeepers, IT workers, right? Folks that, would generally work in an office, although a lot of our people work remotely now, but office type work, right?
Yep.
And making the kind of money they can make and actually having a career. And so that's the niche that we're really looking to play with STARS. We can talk a little bit more about Empower too at some point. Maybe that's the other offering that we've got, because in this climate, what we're finding is that STARS works great when you're in hiring mode, right? And a typical conversation with us might be, boy, we love what you guys are doing. We want to engage in it. We understand. We think it's really, where should we start? We typically start with a pilot somewhere so we can learn how to do neurodiversity in their environment, and then we can expand it.
Yeah.
Right? We can, but learn while we're doing what we do. And so that's typically where that starts, and then it can expand from there. But some of these companies, if the company might say, hey, we've got this division, they're hiring 25 people next year, we've got a bunch of turnover, and we'll say, we'll set aside 5 or 7 roles for us for the STARS program. We'll train your managers, we'll teach you how to do it, we'll develop a set of best practices with you, we'll measure all the outcomes to make sure it's working well. And at the end of the day, you'll have people you wouldn't have otherwise found, and you'll have, you have all these real tangible benefits. We had a customer who came to us and said, well, we'd love to do another STARS program with you maybe next summer. What can we do in the interim? Because we know we've got lots of, and this is how the market has changed as our customers become more educated. We know we've got current employees who are neurodistinct, who do not disclose in mass, right? If it's 25% of the population, we know that we've got people who are in these roles, maybe have been with us for a decade, right? And to some extent are probably struggling a little bit because there are things they might ask for or accommodations or things that might help them to be more successful, but they don't feel like they can ask for those things because they don't feel safe. And they're worried about the stigma of coming forward and saying, hey, I'm dyslexic, or hey, I've got Asperger's, or what have you. And so, that's a really powerful thing. And so what we look at there is we say, okay, if you're not doing that big hiring program, you've still got these employees who are not as engaged, not as productive, lower retention than they might otherwise be. And especially if we're heading into a tighter, a slower labor market where companies need to make more, make them even more important that they make the most out of with the workers that they have
Sure.
now. Empower is that idea of taking the concepts of neurodiversity, but applying them to your current workforce, right? Do we do leadership training? Do we help you with inclusive interviewing or onboarding or set up a mentorship program, creating a resource group for individuals or parents of neurodiverse people? Just how do you meet your workforce as people, as individuals? How do you train your leaders to practice that person-centered leadership with the neurodiversity component being really strong in that? But this should benefit everybody, right? If you have a good mentorship program, it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
If you're good at onboarding, it benefits everybody. So where STARS is all about getting new talent into your organization. Empower is about how do we through neurodiversity and through just creating more of a sense of belonging, how do we unlock that potential for engagement, productivity, retention with your current staff? And so those are the 2 big offerings that we're really focused on right now.
I love that. Jeff, I want to ask you real quick before we start to wrap up and move on to the big 3. First question is, what's next for Potentia as you continue to grow, as you continue to help this underserved population? What's new and exciting? What's coming next?
Well, I think this year we went international, which we're really excited about. So we started in 2019, and I really didn't know how this was going to go. Our first customer was Chevron, so we're on it. It's a good start, right? And then we expanded from there. In 2020, we went national. This year, we went international. So we're doing programs now in Asia. We're doing programs in South America. We're looking at some things in Europe because it's a global problem, right? Unfortunately, every major city in the world has these talented neurodiverse individuals who are largely unemployed or underemployed, who are kind of hiding in plain sight, who are right there. So, we want to be one of the players, and there will be others, but we want to be one of the companies that's really bringing this message to corporations globally about not just is it the right thing to do, but how strong the business case is for doing this. I mean, just at a real basic level, if 25% of the population is neurodiverse and company X is well oriented to support and engage and get the most out of that population, and company Y is really not doing anything there, that's a huge competitive advantage for X over Y, right?
Yeah.
Just full stop. So we want to carry that message forward and just make sure that people understand that. Ultimately, the neurodiversity movement and the initiatives we're doing, and it should really just become part of your overall human capital strategy. So ultimately, we'll work ourselves out of jobs, hopefully, when these companies just not only start a program, but it just becomes part of what they do. Of course, we practice ND-friendly practices when we're going out on campuses and doing college recruiting, because it's 25% of the population. We do this with all of our human capital strategies. That's where we want to help these companies to get to and enjoy the competitive advantages that they will have when they do.
Yeah, amazing. We'll move on to the big three, but where can people find out about you if a company is looking to contract with Potentia? How do they get to you?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Thank you. So potentialworkforce.com. Potentia is like potential without the L. So potentialworkforce, all one word.com. Or they can reach out to me anytime. I get wonderful emails every day. That's just jeff.miller@potentialworkforce.com.
Great. And we'll put all of that in the show notes. We'll put a little bit more information in the show notes. Let's move on to the big three.
The big three from the Launchcast.
You're listening to the Launchcast, produced by Launchpad 516 Studios, with me, your host, the LaunchDad himself, George Andriopoulos. The big three. So we're gonna throw. I'm gonna throw out a few questions at you, Jeff. You're gonna give me your top three quick, concise answers for these. Ready?
Ready as I'm going to be.
All right, great. Three moments in your life, and I love how I say quick, concise answers, but they're these super deep questions. So, sorry. 3 moments in your life when your son Charlie has taken you to school.
Oh my goodness, I love that question. I mean, certainly at Mom's funeral, without a doubt, that was a big one for me. Gosh, there've been 1,000 moments where he just reminds me to stay in the present. One of his strengths is really just to deal with what is, and he's not worried about what happened before, and he's not worried about the next day. He's really just about, I want to have a great day today, and he pulls me back into that often. And so I think that that's a big one. He does that for me an awful lot.
Yeah.
And then just I think he's got really good about asking for what he needs, and my New England stoicism rears its ugly head every once in a while, and I'll just sort of hunker down. And sometimes you got to just hunker down, right? But you also need to be able to share with the people who care about you, what's going on and what you need. And so he reminds me to do that. because he has no problem saying, hey, I really could, I really could we do this today instead of that,
Yeah.
or I'm feeling this kind of way, maybe we don't do that. And so he reminds me of all that stuff, just to live in the present, but don't be afraid to ask the people who love you for support.
Yeah. Love that. 3 biggest failures in your career.
It's a bit cliche. I try not to look at them as failures because, like we said, that's where you learn, right? But definitely, early on in my career, the vision that I had of a leader and trying to be that perfectionist, right, and not letting any kind of humanity in to just, I was a very young manager, and I felt like I had to be perfect, and I couldn't have been more wrong. And I ended up not really connecting with the people who worked for me, not creating an environment where they could tell me how they were living, right? And I could be a better leader in that case. I think that's certainly the biggest one for me, and that's one that I've learned and had to relearn over time. You get busy and you get stressed, and sometimes you revert to those old ways of being. But I think it's not about being perfect. It's about listening. I think too, for me, when I learned about, and I see that, and I caution people about this because it happened to me. When you study something like neurodiversity and autism, the natural tendency we all have is to say, "Oh, okay, now I know what that is."
Yeah.
So George, you're autistic. That must mean that you feel this way. And if I manage you this way, you're going to respond this way.
Yeah.
No, not even close. Right. Right. But when you first learn this stuff, it's like a shiny penny, and you or a new tool, and it's like you're just gifted a hammer and everything looks like a nail, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. The research and the knowledge that we do is really it's an invitation to then ask more questions to the individual.
Yeah.
Right. To learn about them as an individual. And it might give me a little bit of perspective, but I'm not going to assume that just because anymore that, you should assume, because I'm 6'7" that I play basketball or that whatever. Right. It's just that shorthand assumption kind of game that we get into is another big one, I think.
Yeah.
And you gotta know that, doing the homework and learning this stuff is great. We have a saying here: learn the lesson, lose the labels. Right. So learn the lesson of autism generally and how that might affect individuals, but then lose that label and deal with Bobby. Right.
Yep.
And where's Bobby at? What's he? Because I can tell you, managing a team that is majority neurodistinct, there's incredible variation among that team, right? And so I guess the last thing would be I used to think that you had to manage everybody the same, and now I realize that it's really just about managing everybody fairly.
I love that. Last one I'm going to ask you, and then we'll wrap it up. The top 3 things that an employer may not know about having a neurodiverse or neurodistinct employee.
So I think number one is how many neurodistinct employees you already have. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see more of that. So just I'll make these quick, but just one of the really cool things about STARS, every STARS program we do is different because every client is different. But one thing that's the same every time is the number of mid-career people who are at those companies who disclose, whether to us or their bosses or HR or what have you, as part of the company, as part of the program that we're rolling out, right? So they see the company being intentional about embracing neurodiversity, and they've been in the closet about their own neurodiversity, their own neurodistinctness, maybe for years. They've never told anybody. And now they start coming forward and telling their employees. It's an incredibly powerful thing. So just being aware of that, approaching
Yep.
that with humility and understanding that you've got a big population there that's neurodistinct, and then second, it's so acknowledge that. Then it's about creating the environment where folks can come forward if they want to. So individuals own their disclosure. They own their, if it's a diagnosis, or they own that, right? It's not up to anybody else to talk about them or to, right? It's their choice. And some people will say, you know what, I'm just not comfortable right now. That's totally their call. But businesses owe it to themselves to create an environment where people can come forward if they want to.
Yeah.
Right. And as a manager, as a leader, if I know what the problem is, I at least got a shot at solving it. But if my people won't share with me because they don't feel like I've created the right environment, that's on me. And there's a tax I'm going to pay for that because my workers aren't as engaged, as forthright as, they don't feel like they can be. And so I think that's a big one. And then, like I said, don't be afraid to ask for outside help. There's a lot of data on this. A lot of people are studying this concept now since it's such a big factor. A lot of people are doing DEI work, and the point that we make about that is neurodiversity is an incredible force multiplier if you're interested in DEI. And the reason for that is because we talked about 25% of the adult population is neurodistinct. Well, that means every group that you're seeking to work with better is 25% neurodiverse themselves.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, if you've got an initiative where you're trying to hire more vets, more returning vets, right, who are looking to enter the corporate world, or the work world, well, just from PTSD alone, right, at least 25% of that population is neurodistinct. So getting fluent in what neurodiversity is and how it works is a force multiplier to help you with these other areas. Say you want to hire more women in your engineering department, right? Great goal. Well, 25% of those folks are neurodiverse. So any initiative that you have like that is going to be more effective, and it's going to be a force multiplier if you just embrace it and understand how big this population is and how it intersects with all these other groups that are part of your workforce.
Amazing. Jeff, thank you so much for joining today. I had a blast talking to you. I love talking shop with you, man. It's great.
Oh, likewise. I got to do better at when you say, give me a short answer to this. I'm working on that.
I got to do better about asking less complicated questions. These should be. I started years ago with like, what's your favorite pizza place, and things.
Right. What's the meaning of life? Two sentences. Go.
2 sentences. Go.
Yeah.
Jeff, I appreciate it, man. I'm going to put you in the green room, and then after I wrap up, we'll say goodbye. I appreciate you being here, and I will put everything in the show notes so people can reach out to you.
Awesome. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Jeff. Hang on just a second. All right, guys, we did it. Another one. What a great conversation that was. We seem to this season be doing a lot of meaningful interviews. We've already done 2 around the topic of neurodiversity and autism spectrum. So I'm loving the direction that we're going here. Catch us again next week. I want to mention real quick something super, super important to me. So you guys know I've been talking about the new jam, Speak, right? We have moved on from the TEDx platform. My partners and I have launched Speak, a global speaking platform for people with ideas and stories. We have our first pop-up coming up on November 17th. So visit speakevent.com for tickets to that. But we are looking for a couple of things. We are looking for event sponsors. Again, this is a global platform that will be going out both on a heavily trafficked YouTube channel and an upcoming podcast that is we are confident is going to be a very high traffic and highly rated podcast. So stick around for details on that. But those sponsorships get organizations onto those and get them seen in a very, very, very big way. And so we would love support for our brand new organization as we build this global platform. We'll have news coming in a couple of weeks. We're working on a couple of our own self-produced events that are going to be happening locally. But after the November 17th Speak Beginnings event, we are going to announce probably the first 10 to 15 Speak pop-ups that are happening from outside producers, and they are happening all over the world. I promise you that. I can't even wait to share that news with you guys. So again, sponsors, we are looking for sponsors to help us sponsor this platform to keep growing. Of course, channel partners, producers, all of that. You can find all that information at speakevent.com. If you're interested in sponsorship, reach out to me and we'll send you that sponsor info. We don't have that on the website, but I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for joining for another episode, another great deep dive leadership conversation. We'll see you next week.
Launch sequence terminated.
Into the black hole. Into the black hole.
The Launchcast is brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios, produced by Fabrizio Fugazi and executive produced by George Andriopoulos. Marketing and PR by Media Convergence. Theme song by Tommy Lungberg. Music and sound effects are licensed through Epidemic Sound. The Launchcast is hosted with Podbean. Make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts while you're at it, guys. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and everywhere else that podcasts are available. Follow me, George Andriopoulos, the host, at Launchpad CEO on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or follow the show at The Launchcast Show on Facebook and Instagram, or at Launchcast Show on Twitter. Visit our website, thelaunchcast.com, and make sure to follow all the great podcasts produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. We'll see you next time, guys.